Hi everyone, it's Chris at Synth Studio. This video I've been so excited to bring out to you guys for a number of months because I have been wanting to put an internal battery into my Roland Verselab since the day I got it. I'm not in the studio, I'm out at a pub, out at a cafe, so I want as few dongles and bricks hanging all over the table as possible. Having an internal battery in the Roland Verselab has totally transformed the device for me. As much as I would love to recommend everybody do this, I kind of can't. Reason number one is it has completely voided my 2-year warranty. Second reason is I totally bricked my Verselab. It sat on a shelf and I just was sad for weeks. I thought it was all over, and then I found out there might be a way to resurrect it. So I managed to resurrect my Verselab. It spurred me on to go down this second round to make it kind of my ideal groove box. I can't wait to share this with you. It will void your warranty. You will probably also brick your Verselab. Don't do it. It's a terrible idea. But just in case you're like me and you couldn't help yourself, what you're about to see is just enough detail to be able to do it yourself. So without further ado, on to the video. Gotta get our tchotchke in here. All right, team, here we are. This is my Verselab. What I'm gonna do is give you a little tour around it. First of all, you'll notice the case is black, and that's because I painted it. This is a ripcord from MyVolts. Notice the extra little hole right there. That is to make room for the cable to come out of the casing. On the front, there's a little bit more interesting stuff as you get over here. The USB-C port with 2 screws to mount it on the inside. I attempted to open up the right size hole. Of course, kind of failed, but that's okay. And then finally on the bottom, that is a button that gives us a battery level. Now, how did we do this? I think we should open her up, don't you? Go ahead and extract all the screws from there. They are all the same length, so you don't need to worry about mixing them up. Tip over the Verselab to catch all of my screws in one safe spot. Now that all of our screws are out from the bottom of the casing, the top of the casing can open. Now before you go ahead and remove that, there is a ribbon connecting the 2 circuit boards on the top and bottom casing. Let me describe a little bit of what's going on here. Obviously right here is the battery, USB-A on this side, and then a USB-C over here. On the opposite side, we have that little round button. On the USB-A side, we have the 5.7 volt MyVolts ripcord cable. We've got a USB-C cable. The MyVolts cable kind of sneaks around, routes over here, and then out of that little hole that I showed you earlier. In this case, there is not room to put a battery here. This top casing here has these like edges. Why this is kind of a little bit of a hardcore mod is because you have to remove a lot of this like structural reinforcement bar. So if you kind of follow these lines, see this one here. So that normally goes all the way to here. Another one that starts here, you can see it, and it goes all the way, connects there. And then there's one here, and et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of these cross member things. You've got to hack those out and get them flush with the bottom surface of the casing in order to fit a battery. The trick to this hack is just making enough room and securing all the cabling in a tidy enough way, and the battery in a tidy enough way that you don't damage all the circuitry. So step number 1, pop the case. Step number 2, remove all the screws that hold all the circuit boards on. And that actually includes some of these front exterior screws that secure some of these ports. Remove all the circuit boards very carefully. Then get your battery, take something like a Sharpie and mark the spots where you need to hack the space out. Then take something like a Dremel and cut those out as flush with the bottom plate as you can. You're going to be spitting all this debris from these cuts. Remove all your circuitry before you do this. So you've done that, you've thoroughly cleaned all of your cutting debris out of the casing and probably even wiped it down with something like tack cloth. You're ready to install your battery. What I did is used a couple very thin strips of 3M VHB tape. For VHB, that is plenty. Now you're plugging in cables. Look at what I've done here and just try to do that same thing. And then for the MyVolts cable, all the MyVolts cables come with like this little like button, like a metal button thing that's like screwed into this big sort of housing for the USB-A end, and then that button has like this little like fake leather strappy thing so that you can wrap up all the extra cable. That button just unscrews. So just unscrew that counterclockwise and just remove that. You're gonna need the space that it takes up. I think we've covered everything on the inside, so what I'm gonna do is button this up and then we'll start talking about the outside of the casing. Okay, now let's talk about the exterior kind of modifications to make this work. That hole right next to the MIDI DIN port, what I did is I took maybe a 3/16 drill bit and just kind of push it sideways until I had enough space to comfortably get this out. You need to feed this like relatively giant head of a plug through somewhere to get it through that port. And it's just not gonna fit through any other of these ports, you know, on the side where the DC plug is. So that's why I did it right here. For the other hole, what I did is very carefully just drilled the holes for these little screws. And then I also remove enough material for the female port to stick through well, but yeah, it's kind of mangled. I wish that was a little cleaner. Now, this was probably one of the trickiest parts, was aligning this hole. I took one of those step-size drill bits. I drilled this hole, tried to get it the same size as the button for the battery. Gosh, this whole time, we still haven't even fired this thing up. I mean, let's do that. One of the nice things about using the MyVolts cable, which is not required, by the way, you could instead use a cable that plugs into the USB-B port. The reason I use the MyVolts cable is because I didn't want the hassle of having to hold value every time I turned on the switch, and it also keeps that USB port free for if I want to plug in a MIDI controller or something like that. I mean, I do use the vocals quite a bit, so I want the phantom power and stuff like that. And by default, if you plug a battery into that USB-B port and just flick it on, then you lose, most of you know this, but you lose a little bit of functionality. Things like the LED brightness across the board is dimmer. I'm pretty sure you lose phantom power for the mic, so this. And then you also lose a really kind of, I think, ridiculous amount of headphone volume. So I think it's just a nice kind of, you know, day-to-day lifestyle thing to just have the DC port plugged in, and then you don't have to worry about it. But again, it is optional. If you have any questions about my Verselab, go ahead and throw them down in the comments. Even with all the risk involved, I'm really glad that I did it. And I use this thing all the time. It's completely transformed it for me into a very much more easy to use, much more truly portable device. If you do this mod to your Verselab, let me know in the comments. Would I do it again? Probably. I'm really happy with how mine turned out. I want to see how you did it. And I also want to see just how you're using your Verselab. So let me know in the comments. If you like this video, it really helps if you click like, and if you're interested in more content like this, Groovebox accessories and hacks, then subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.